Welcome to Keto Life Support, where we make your keto life sustainable, fun, and low stress. I'm Kim Howerton, and I'll be coming to you weekly with some of my keto besties to bring you the practical, real-world keto advice that you need. Quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor, and even if we do have a doctor in the house from time to time, he or she is not your doctor, and nothing we say on this show should be taken as medical advice. Always check in with a trusted medical professional about your own personal medical concerns. Hello and welcome back to Keto Life Support. This is Kim Howerton, your host, and I am very happy to be joining you today to bring you a special episode with someone I adore, Eiges. Amy is both an amazing person for what she's accomplished and just she's hilarious. So I hope that you will enjoy this episode to listen to as much as I enjoyed to record it. Amy was actually one of my very first clients when I started keto coaching. She has lost over 200 pounds since then and is in her own right a very knowledgeable keto person who is now coaching with Dr. Tro on the East Coast. She's also spent time working for the Nutrition Coalition, and you can find out more about her in the show notes, but I'm getting ahead of myself. On today's episode, Amy and I are going to talk about our experiences pre-keto, trying to intuitively eat, what worked for us and what didn't. And then we also get into just the process of weight loss, what kind of emotional changes we've gone through, what kind of mental changes we've gone through, how we eat differently now than when we first started. And we talk a little bit about the challenges of talking about keto in a world that only values thinness at times, which can be tough when you're in a body that is still on its weight loss journey. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and please let us know if you have any suggestions for future topics. Thank you so much. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to Keto Life Support. This is Kim Howerton, and I am joined by a very special guest today, Eiges, and I am super excited. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Kim. How are you?
I'm doing well, and it is mid-January where we're recording this, and I indeed still have my Christmas tree up behind me.
I think, you know what? These are very unusual and extraordinary times, and I think that calls for an extraordinary Christmas tree.
You know,
festivity.
You got to do what makes you happy.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I've known Amy for, it's got to be a little over 4 years now. And we met in an interesting way. I was just getting started with keto coaching and somehow ended up on a video on Diet Doctor talking about keto. And Amy managed to somehow see it.
Yeah, I was brand new to keto. And I was lost in the do I do higher protein? Do I do higher fat? Do I do this? And I was so confused. And I thought, I need somebody to help me cut through the BS. And somehow I saw a video with you on Diet Doctor. And I was like, she looks like the one I want to work with because I know she's got a wicked sense of humor and and she will get me.
Right. So I won you over with sarcasm and a side eye.
Exactly. Never doubt the strengths of a good side eye.
Well, and that was just the
and
start.
Snark.
Okay, yes, I speak native snark. I think it's the mom from Queens. I don't know but that's, yeah.
Well, maybe that's it because I'm a native New Yorker. So maybe I just somehow knew.
We were people.
Yeah, you were one of my peeps.
Right. And so Amy has gone on to have incredible success with keto. Have you lost over 200 pounds?
I have. I just crossed that 200-pound threshold.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's insane. Nobody is more shocked than I. I can't even believe it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I say this wherever I can, and I owe so much of that success to the amazing foundation and education that you gave me. It has really stood me in good stead. I mean, it is something that I fall back on every single day. So that was a little unsolicited testimonial.
I didn't make her say that.
Well, you can Venmo me the money, but
okay, sure.
But really, no, it is the truth. You have given me an incredible education, and I am forever in your debt for it.
Well, you have paid me back tenfold with what you've paid forward to the keto community, because now what you've done work with Nina Teichel's with the Nutrition Coalition, and now you're working with clients with Dr. Tro.
I am. I have about a year and a half ago, I became ACE certified to be a health coach. In addition to the work that I do with Nina Teichel's at the Nutrition Coalition, working to reform the U.S. dietary guidelines, which are so sadly in need of reformation because they are not based on any rigorous science. Yeah, so I work kind of with, at the Nutrition Coalition, I kind of work on the macro picture, the big picture stuff. And as a health coach with Dr. Tro's practice, I get to work one-on-one with people to hopefully inspire them the way you inspire me and give them an education. And I think my superpower is that I can try to maybe offer hope, because I just didn't believe it was possible. You know, after 50 years of hitting my head against a wall, it's like, oh, it's going to hurt when you hit the wall again. But yeah, so if I can offer anything, it's just hope.
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't what we were planning on talking about, but just that hope message is so important, because I think so many of us end up coming to keto as this last ditch effort. And it's almost painful to have hope at that point.
Well, it's sort of like, it's the ultimate leap of faith. I have said this so many times, but I have joined, I think I joined Weight Watchers over 35 times over the course of my life. But think about the amount of hope that I had to have had to keep every January to keep joining, or, you know, OptiFast, or, you know, Jenny Craig, or any number of programs. And I was maybe a couple of weeks away from bariatric surgery, which I knew was not the right decision for me. You know, I think it's a viable option for many. For me, I knew it was not right. And we'll talk, I think, maybe a little bit about the piece of why I felt it wasn't right for me later on in the conversation. But I very much identify as a food addict. And I thought, I'm just going to end up addicted to something else if I have bariatric surgery. But I was so desperate. I was living in a body that felt like prison. And I just was desperate to get the weight off and be able to move. And I knew, you know, my mother had died very early from result of type 2 diabetes. And I knew that was going to be my trajectory, just fast forward a couple of years. And so I was going to go through with the bariatric surgery. And then thank God, I did a random Google search and found Diet Doctor, and then found you, and I found keto. But yeah, that hope, like, what right did I have to have that hope? Because everything else had just failed so miserably. But thank God I did. I think, you know, that I just kept showing up for myself somehow, by grace of whatever God you believe in. So, yeah.
You know, and I remember in the early days of us working together, the kinds of things that you sort of really were troubled by and like agonized over, and what was important to you and what wasn't important to you. And then over time, you know, I remember you remarking later, like, I don't know why that was such a big deal, or like, why was that so important? But like, you have to go through it. You have to see the events through and know that this will not always bother you. This will not always be such a big deal. This will become a natural thing.
Yeah, I remember I couldn't even begin to wrap my head around the fact that I'd maybe never have a New York bagel again, or never have a piece of New York pizza again. And I mean, I still think about that sometimes, but I kind of note it with interesting curiosity now when I walk by something in Manhattan now and it smells good. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. As opposed to like, are you never going to go in there? Yeah, you know, it doesn't feel, I don't know, maybe that sort of, it goes to the intuitive eating piece that we've talked about. And I think you wanted to talk a little bit about, but yeah, I could never have fathomed, you know, I think part of it is that I don't see this, I don't think there's a finish line anymore. You know, this just is. Right. And then how am I going to make this the best that I can in this moment, as opposed to like, there's going to be a beginning, middle, and an end.
Right. Yeah. So speaking of intuitive eating, you just mentioned, that's actually what I was letting the audience in on it. I was like, Amy, let's talk about intuitive eating when I got in touch, because one, I think it will be funny. And two, I think in our past, we both had that. I don't know. So in my past, like before I went keto, I've struggled. I mean, I think this is why we get along. I've struggled with my weight since I was conscious, but like 8, 9, it's been a big part of my awareness. And I grew up in the Bay Area in California, and it's an area with a lot of hippies. And I'll just put it that way. Not that you have to be a hippie to think about intuitive eating, but they do actually tend to coincide a lot. Like, if you feed your body, if you allow your body the freedom to have its desires, it will steer you correctly, that your desire can lead, and you will self-correct and self-regulate when you move away from restrictions. That's sort of what my introduction to the concept of intuitive eating was. Do you have a memory of what you thought of?
I do. And I did a lot of work around this because, I was so disenfranchised by the whole diet thing. And then I finally started reading some books by Janine Roth, who I believe is from Berkeley, or she's somewhere over there.
I've seen her speak, so she probably is.
But yeah, so I started reading her books and they really resonated for me. And maybe it was because I was so disenfranchised. It offered me some place to land that wasn't self-hatred, right. That wasn't just like, you're disgusting and you're fat and there's no use for you in society, right. Like
you'll only be worthwhile when you're thin, period.
Right. And so I think that sort of that health at any size, every size movement and the intuitive eating thing, they sort of go hand in hand. And I think that really is an offshoot of how just desperate everybody is. And we're so disenfranchised because everything fails.
Right.
So what else is there? I finally landed at a place that gave me some semblance of peace.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was through reading Janine Roth's books, and then I kind of went down the rabbit hole, and I would go see her speak occasionally when she was on the East Coast, and I started working with a therapist that worked with intuitive eating, did intuitive eating, and I really, in my gut, I think I still believe in it. It seems like, there's no baby that's born like just eating Cheetos, right? Like just eating bags of chips. Or like babies stop eating when they're full and they tell you when they're hungry. And it sort of seems like it should be like it makes sense.
Right.
But I ultimately ended up gaining about 50 pounds eating intuitively. And I thought, all right, I guess I really am broken beyond repair.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I had a similar kind of experience that, I got really tired of hating myself at one point in my life. And that's actually when I got into life coaching. I was like, let me just work this out. I mean, if I'm going to be fat, I might as well be in some sort of approval around it and enjoy my life somewhat, because clearly this is not going to change. But at the same time, eventually with the intuitive eating, what ended up happening to me is I felt better for a while. And then I felt increasingly insane because I was like, I am on like a ship with no steering wheel. Like I'm like full speed ahead iceberg. I'm not in control here. Something else is in control and I don't know what it is, but it is not good.
Yeah, I had the same experience and I didn't realize until I went keto what the something else was that was in control.
Yeah.
I thought I was just broken. I thought, but I had to say, I did have some semblance of peace for it. There was a little bit of a honeymoon phase where I was like, oh, I have bags of cookies that went stale. And that is just, even now I see even like the keto cookies, I still see, a bag of 12 cookies as a single serving. Like my head still sees that. But I would, there were early days of intuitive eating where things would go stale and I wasn't compelled and felt compulsive to eat everything, but then it was just uncharted territory.
Yeah, I think there's just multiple issues that come together that make it not work for a lot of people. And I find, it might work for multiple groups of people, but for people who are what I would call carbohydrate intolerant, there's a reality that I experienced, which was, no one suggests that you can intuitively be a Coke user. Right. Like you cannot be an intuitive crack addict.
Right. You can't moderate your cocaine crack addiction.
Right. I'm sure there are people that are like, look, I only do Coke like twice a year at the party and it's fine and low risk. But for the most part, these things tend to get out of control because we have things like pleasure centers in our brain and various hormones that get affected. So for a lot of us, I definitely had a feeling like conceptually intuitive eating should work. And I was my intuitive eating was hijacked by my overeating brain.
Yeah, I think that, honestly, I think for most people, even those that are not carbohydrate intolerant, I think a lot of people end up using a lot of executive function to get off that carb roller coaster or to moderate that carb roller coaster.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that it's really when you're riding up and down that carb coaster, because, carbs have the same effect on everybody's glucose. I mean, not the same effect, but, they make most people
similar pattern.
Yeah. I mean, some people, go unnaturally high, but I mean, carbs make your blood glucose go up.
Right.
And what goes up must come down at some point, some quicker than others. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think that they're using a lot of white knuckling willpower, executive function to kind of to moderate that roller coaster of.
Right. And it's interesting. I mean, I look at my family members, right? Mm-hmm. I was the one with the most significant weight problem in my family, but everyone in my family at some time or another my immediate family has struggled with their weight and with their relationship with food. And, it's interesting to see how there seems to be this pattern that people go through in the non-keto world. I mean, maybe in everybody goes through this somewhat pattern. Like it's the New Year's resolution concept. It's like they get a little loose, then they get a little tighter. Then they're like, oh, I got to tighten, then I got a little looser. Then they, it's like this in and out of they let themselves go a little bit and then they have to reel it back in. And then it rarely just sort of works on a flow state.
Do you mean it rarely works without some sort of intervention?
Exactly. Thank you for explaining what I'm trying to say. Yeah, even, and it's different degrees. Like if I look at my dad is a, ex-lawyer, very controlled, very organized, he keeps track of everything. He works out every day. He's, almost 80, but he, he does golfs all day, he's on it, exercising, but he's like, oh, I'm up 2 pounds this week. I'm going to need to XYZ. So he's always monitoring. My mom is more periods of time where things go and whatever happens. And then suddenly she's like, I'm only eating 600 calories for the next 4 years. Right. And so it's
does she know what you do for a living?
It is a bit of a sore subject.
I've
tried. I've really
met you.
She has, and we are very similar in personality, which means that we cannot work together.
Got it.
But I have explained many things.
I'm sure.
Many times. Sure. Anyway, but the issue is, not to harp on my mom, I think you have to reach a point, and I think you and I reached this point where I was like, I am unwilling to be unhappy with myself all the time. There was a point when I first went keto where I was like, I cannot foresee a future that looks like my past. I will jump off of a bridge.
That's really that's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
To think that. Yeah. I tried hating myself then. I tried.
It would be so nice if it worked.
I tried so hard. If I could have hated myself then, I would have finished this when I was about 13. And then,
Right. Oh, I thought you said eating yourself then. No, not hating yourself.
Oh, no.
My comment made no sense.
No. I ate myself. I dieted myself my way to 400 pounds and I hated myself all the way there too. Right. I mean, society at large, every part of, this world tells you if you are fat, that you should hate yourself. And you just eat less, move more. And, I had a doctor once tell me that I should take up an extreme sport to lose weight, that I should take up mountain climbing. I was 400 pounds at the time. And I walked out of there, I'm like, what's wrong with me? I think she was a Harvard educated doctor. And I walked out of there hating myself even more. And it's only when you get to a certain place of acceptance that you can actually begin to do what you need to do. And acceptance doesn't mean accepting that you want to stay there. It means I'm okay. How do I phrase it? I mean,
I think it's that you like yourself enough to care about your future.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast on the drive this morning where it was with Brene Brown, one of her podcasts, and they had an author on, and I didn't get to listen to most of the interview yet, but the name of the author's book was something like "Your Body Is Not an Apology."
Yeah, I have that. I haven't read it yet, but I saw.
Yeah. I only got to listen to the first few minutes before I got to my destination, but I thought that is a really amazing title. And I thought, my body's not an apology. Now, that doesn't mean I was going to accept it where it was, but I also didn't need to hate it anymore. And it wasn't until I came to a place of sort of all right, this is where I am. What am I going to do? How am I going to move forward from here?
Right. Yeah. By the way, it is Sonia Renee Taylor.
Yeah.
Is the author of that book, just for people who want to look for it. I think that's really powerful. I think a lot of people struggle so much with accepting themselves. And it's interesting. Sometimes, I know this is crazy, but sometimes I wonder if being way outside the norm makes it almost easier, which is a weird concept. But I see so many women who are 25 pounds overweight, according to their brain, right?
Right.
And they never stop in their head with the negative self-talk and I hear women call themselves disgusting who are 10 pounds overweight. I'm like, really? No. And, and there's a way that one day I looked around and I was like, I was approaching 300 pounds. I wasn't quite above the 300 pound mark, but I was in a lot of pain and it felt awful. And I really struggled, but I was like, I don't think I hate myself more than these women who are just trying to aerobicize off 20 pounds. It's not a competition is what I guess I'm saying, but there's almost a way that I wondered one day if being so outside of the norm made us have to do some different level of soul seeking.
I certainly think that. I think there's that aspect of it, but I think that, for me, it wasn't even just hating myself. There was such a level of despair and despondence because I just felt like, why can't I get a handle on this? I'm a smart person. I can do things, I was in such despair over it, but I agree that when you are that, facing that adversity for whatever reason, it does force you to become a deeper, stronger, more resilient person. And that has, I think, stood us both in good stead, ultimately.
Well, it's got to be good for something. I do agree with you, though. It's not just about the self-hatred, right? It's about the fact that we've been sold a bill of goods our whole life. We're about, the same generation. And,
that's very generous to you, Kim.
I think I literally I don't know how old you are, but I assume we're the same age.
I think I'm 10 years older than you.
Oh, well, Amy, you look great.
Oh, go on.
But we're still in the same generation. You could be my older sister.
We have the same cultural references.
Exactly. Yeah. But growing up, I was also joined Weight Watchers when I was before high school, well before high school, and had that experience of over and over again ramping up, trying to get my courage up to start again, try again, do this again. And you just at some point run out. You like run out of hope, you run out of belief, and you start to just think you're incapable of making this work like everyone is supposed to.
Yeah. It's sort of the definition of insanity. It's just keep doing it over and over and expecting a different result. And yet, we're told, Weight Watchers is some variation thereof, some kind of counter. It's the moderate way. It's the sensible way. It's the smart way. It's what every doctor says to do. And we were just sold a bill of goods. We were given such bad information for so many years. And people are still getting, we're still outliers in this keto world. As much as, it's become trendy and popular and everybody's slapping the word keto on their processed goods and in the supermarket, it's all over the place. But we still are, it's still the U.S. News and World, it's early January, that U.S. News and World Report diet report came out, and keto is still, at the bottom of the barrel. The worst. Meanwhile, I think, their advertising dollars come mostly from Weight Watchers, but, whatever.
Right.
There's not a lot of money to be made in just eating meat and vegetables.
Right.
For the processed food companies anyway.
Yeah. So, but once I found, I just didn't know what satiety felt like, I think, for most of my life. When I went keto and spent enough time being keto, by that I mean not eating a lot of carbs, eating a sufficient amount of protein, and eating enough fat that I was satisfied, I found that the things that I couldn't understand about intuitive eating once upon a time, once upon a time, I thought intuitive eating was like binge permission. It's like, wait, I can have all that I want? That's amazing. Of anything I want, it was like, I was like, this is amazing. I can just, because my only concept of enough was a binge. And then when I went keto, and after a while, I was like, I can actually see that I could intuitively eat at this point. But I think for me, over time, I have found that I think intuitive eating is fabulous. And I think for a lot of people, it's what you want to do. And by that, I just mean eat the right foods when you're hungry. Don't eat when you're not hungry. Stop when you're full. Your body will work. But I found that I feel saner and happier, at least most of the time, when I actually am tracking. I don't know how you are with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, it's so interesting you say that. First of all, I think you really touched on it. It's, paying attention. When I started doing intuitive eating, that was my first foray into understanding how little food I needed to satiate my physical hunger. Now, of course, when I was riding the glucose and the sugar roller coaster up and down, that hunger was constantly getting hijacked. But I do use pieces of that now, to your point, on keto. And now that I'm not up and down that sugar roller coaster, now that I'm not, riding up and down and constantly having cravings, I do use it often in this realm. And I go back and forth with tracking. I am an old Weight Watcher. I love to track. I love to measure. I don't love it, but I feel like it's safe for me.
Home.
It's home. And so when I first started working with Dr. Tro, I would give him my food logs, and he's got a little bit of a firebrand presence online, but in person, he's incredibly caring and engaged with his patients. And he looked at my food logs, and he was sort of uncharacteristically disinterested in them. He'd be like, all right, great. He's like, and then one week he kind of put him aside. He's like, are you hungry? And I was like, what the hell do you care if I'm hungry or not? How is that,
how is that relevant?
How is that relevant in my diet? No doctor had ever asked me if I was hungry before. It was just eat less and move more,
Yeah.
And he said to me, why don't you try not tracking for a little bit and just track your hunger. Track the foods that make you hungry, track the foods that make you not hungry, track the foods that satiate you for longer, and which is really, that's intuitive eating for you, right?
It is.
And lo and behold, I stopped tracking, and I did it because I had a safety net. I was, at that point, I was coming into his office. I was patient, and I was coming into his office, and I had a safety net, and I felt like, all right, I'm going to take a leap of faith here. I certainly can't trust myself. So I'm going to take a leap of faith. And I ended up losing an additional 80 or so pounds, not tracking. But I do still struggle and with the overeating aspect of it. And I do have to kind of check in with myself very regularly. Are you hungry? I mean, and there's many reasons that I can find to overeat, that have nothing to do with physical hunger. And that's also work that I did when I was doing intuitive eating. It's, am I stressed? Am I tired? Am I bored, anxious, happy, sad? Is there a global pandemic? Is the world falling apart? Am I
do I feel out of control?
Yeah. I mean, but no longer riding up and down that cravings roller coaster.
Yeah.
Really gives me a fighting chance at when I ask myself, am I hungry? And the answer comes back, no, you're not hungry, but damn, I still want to eat. And I get annoyed. Yeah. Well, that is a whole other lesson that I have to listen to or learn, or, I don't always learn it, but I acknowledge it.
It's there. Yeah. What's really interesting that you bring that up is one of the things that I have said in the past is I think for a lot of people, it is shocking that what started as a diet, right? They went keto to lose weight, turns into their first real lesson in personal boundaries and emotional self-regulation. Because ultimately, one day you have to realize that the majority of your relationship with food is not really about the food.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it is shocking to me how little food it takes to satiate me. Certainly now, that I'm experiencing like that appetite suppression that keto brings with it. But even before, it is shocking how little food one needs to be physically full.
Yeah.
In the moment. I'm not talking about, cravings and things like that, but coming to the realization that, why am I still eating? Right. What's going on here? What are all the other reasons that are driving me to eat? Right. And coming to kind of grips with that. That's, I think, honestly, once you get the carbs out of your system and once you kind of level out your hormones, that's where the long-term ongoing work is but I still work it day in and day out.
Yeah. And I think it's a lifelong, I'm sorry everybody for this tidbit, but it's good news actually, but it's a lifelong process. You don't have to get it right today and you probably won't, but you get to work on it every day and have another chance every day to, get a deeper understanding of why you're reaching for food when you're not hungry. And so I think, I was a little glib at the beginning of the call about intuitive eating because I'm just glib. But it is that the underlying actual concept is super important. I just think 99% of the time we misunderstand what it's really about.
Yeah. And I do think the lessons that I learned doing intuitive eating have really helped me along the way, but it was nearly impossible to do.
Yeah.
When I was just, thinking that it was a free for all, and I was just riding that cravings roller coaster up and down. It was just a never ending cycle that I could never get off of. But really having dialed in sort of what hunger is, what it feels like, that has really just been crucial in my keto journey.
Right. Yeah, I was listening to a person I know who she does intuitive eating, and she's somebody who's never had a weight problem in her whole life. And she teaches intuitive eating, and she was talking about raising a child trying to do intuitive eating and how much of a mind F it was essentially because, she's like, my daughter wanted a cupcake. So I was like, sure, have a cupcake. So she had a cupcake and then she wanted another cupcake. And I wanted to say, do you need another cupcake? But I didn't want to demonize the cupcake. I didn't want it to seem like there was anything wrong with wanting a second. So she was in this whole mental spiral of trying to, not make any food bad. And then I stopped and I thought, well, in the context I have at this time, and I think she eventually got there too. I'm not calling this person out. It's a very real discussion one should have is, what's the effect of the cupcake? if you have the cupcake, what's happening in your body? How do you feel? You know, what are your hormones going to do now? What is your blood sugar going to do now?
What is the cupcake going to make you eat in 2
Next?
hours?
Right. And like, you know, if you ate something else, would you feel better than, you know, and so I'm not a believer in demonizing food in any way. At the same time, I think you cannot separate the fact that food is data for your body to do things with that you cannot control by your desire. It just happens.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I thought when you were talking about the little girl with the cupcake was that meme that went around of the little girl eating the ice cream for the first time, and she like took one bite and her eyes just lit up,
exploded.
And she was like shoving it in her mouth. But then the other thing that I did think of was this idea of demonized food, and I do think that there is something about, you know, maybe the fact that we both did intuitive eating well before we were keto, and we kind of disabused ourselves of the notion of because we had stopped demonizing food, because there is that deprivation cycle. There's that, like, you know, where you swing the pendulum so far in one direction that when it releases, you just go so far to the opposite direction. And so if you stop the intuitive eating, if you stop demonizing food, maybe it becomes a little less charged, so that once you go keto and you kind of go through the grieving process of giving up your carbs, it becomes like you're not swinging that pendulum. It feels intellectually, it feels like it's swinging the pendulum apart. It feels extreme, but maybe it allows us to kind of have some peace around it, because we're no longer in that diet binge deprivation cycle where we've dieted for so many years, and just, you know, like I always think for every diet there's an equal and opposite binge, but I don't know, it could be just a theory. I don't know.
To your point, I think that it was a huge benefit to me that I'd given up dieting years before I went keto.
You just said what I said, but in like two beautiful little sentences.
I got the benefit of listening to you, and I was like, I know what she's saying. And I think that the danger is if you come to keto as quote unquote just another diet, you run the risk of not doing the deeper work.
Yeah. Well, and also you don't really see the benefits of keto for quite some time. I mean, it does take a commitment. It takes at least a good couple months until you start, you know, like ketones hit their highest point, and it just, you know, if you're going to be doing this because you want to just, you know, lose a couple pounds just in 3 weeks, you know, I don't know. I don't know why you bother. You know, it's, So it does take commitment. It does take.
Oh, I was going to say, and ultimately, I mean, you know, one of the things that happens is you go through stages and phases, right? Like at this point, like, there was one point at which I was like definitely part of the keto religious dogma, you know, kind of like this idea that it's like, it is keto or nothing.
Totally.
You know, now I'm like, you know, not everyone needs to do keto. It just depends where you're at. I see a lot of benefit to it. If somebody's very metabolically healthy, there might be other things that will work for that. But all of the science of keto and all of the science I learned through keto and all of the adjustments I learned by going keto, like the whole journey, like every single part of it has benefited me. And now no longer, it just feels like life now. And maybe that's why I feel less dogmatic about it, because it's just good health.
Yeah, I think it feels like this is the first time I've ever done anything like this where I didn't feel like there was a finish line. Now, when I first started, I thought, oh, there's definitely a finish line. I'm going to lose this weight and then that's it. You know, then I just, whatever. But I don't know, there seemed to be a shift about 2 years ago, maybe longer, I don't know, where I was like, oh, I'm just going to have to tweak as I go and figure out what I need in this moment, because there's no end game here. The end game is just continued health, and it's continued good health. And I mean, truthfully, most of the time, while I still make ketones, I've actually increased my carbs a little bit. Just I don't really tell a lot of people because
it's just you and me here on this.
I know, but they may make me hand in my keto, membership card or something. But I go up higher in carbs now, and I'm still making ketones, and I'm metabolically, as my doctor said, I have healed myself. My fasting insulin is good. My A1C is good. My blood markers are good. I'm having a higher carbs, and I'm still making keto. I'm still well in ketosis. So yeah, it's tweaking and doing and what works for you in the moment.
Right. Totally. And yeah, the way that I and you too, like the way we did keto 4 years ago is not the way we do keto now. And the way I do keto is not necessarily the way you do keto and vice versa. It's the reality is I feel like keto is a bit of a doorway, right? It's like, we're going to learn how our body works. We're going to learn what insulin does. We're going to learn the effect of food on our body, mentally, physically, all of that. And then from there, our life is just going to be about dialing it in for what works now, which similarly, might be more carbs right now, less carbs right now, more meat, less meat, more fat, less fat, more protein. Like it's always an evolution about what suits you at the age you are, in the life circumstances you are, with the activities you're doing, and with the current state of your metabolic system.
Yeah, I will say that there's some old tapes that do play. Every time I feel like I need to make a tweak in something, if something's not working, or if I want to, because I still do want to lose about 20 pounds or so. Listen, if I stayed where I was for the rest of my life, I have won the Super Bowl of weight loss. I mean, but there's still that vanity 20 pounds. But every time something, either like I get on the scale and it's up a couple of pounds, or those old tapes come roaring back, like, what's wrong with you? You're screwed up. This is like going to be all the others, and I have to kind of talk myself off the ledge. And I think that is really the result of 50 years of dieting, and just being part of a broken system, that's just, but I have to keep it in check.
Yeah. And I think one of the risks of dogmatism is there was a period of time on my keto journey where I wanted to lose more weight. And in fact, I started gaining weight. But I was like, I'm still keto and I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing according to everything I'm supposed to be doing. And what is happening? And I began to mentally spiral a bit into that place where it's like, my savior has abandoned me, right?
Did you start to think that keto wasn't going to work?
I was like
keto wasn't working anymore. And you've created this whole
life
in your head on quicksand.
Exactly. Right. Like I thought this was going to work and I was fooled. And now it comes to find out that it was just another, I went down this rabbit hole of feeling incredibly betrayed by what I was like, and then I had to stop and take a step back and be like, I am still down 60 pounds.
It's so funny you say that.
I have gained 10 back. It was like, wait a minute. I was gaining 5 pounds a month at one point, compared to back in the day when I was in binges. And now I was like, wait, hold on.
A little perspective. It would go a long way.
Exactly. And then from there, I was like, oh, I did get to that place where I was like, no, this is what you do. This is how it works. And I just kept beating and I was like, oh no, actually keto is a loose philosophy. It's not a set of rules. I have signed no contract that says I must do X, Y, and Z.
I must have your keto membership card, but you must turn it in.
Please present your membership, right? I was like, you know what? I get to figure this out and I get to tweak based on all of the things I've learned on my keto journey. And then that's what I did. And then I fixed, what wasn't working. And through that process, I realized, oh, this is life, right? Why do I think my weight is any different? You get a job, you love the job, you do the job stops working for you, you decide to change something about the job. I'm not going to stop working. I'm going to fix what isn't working about the work.
Right. I have to say, of all the people that I have met in this, quote unquote keto low carb community, I have never met anybody that is more diligent and more disciplined about experimenting than you. I mean, I am constantly amazed, and I am constantly learning from your experiments.
Thank you. Some of them failed. You learn sometimes more from a failed experiment than a winning one. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is truly amazing the things that you put your body through in the name of, for all of our good health.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, some of them have been a little more painful than others. But what's also very interesting, not to just gab on, is I've tried experiments at different points of time that were like, this is impossible. I can't do this. This is awful. Everything sucks. Like when I did it then, and I revisited it years later, and I was like, this is a piece of cake. Like, what was that? Why was it so hard? And
not a literal piece of cake, but
this. Good point. This is a no cake. This is what's the? I don't know what the expression. Easy peasy. Now
there you go. Okay.
But I don't eat peas. Why are all these expressions so useless?
They're all high carb expressions.
I know. It is just that nothing is able to be understood devoid of circumstance.
Well, it's context.
Context. Exactly. Yeah. That's the word that I could find.
Yeah. I mean, I remember early on, I was, doing the higher fat and the lower protein and super low carbs, or moderate protein, I should say, and the super low carbs. And I couldn't eat like that now. And I certainly couldn't. I don't know that well, maybe with the higher fat. I don't do higher fat now. I'm way higher protein now.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit higher carb, and I'm mostly low fat, and which ironically is not dissimilar to the way I ate on Weight Watchers for hundreds of years. And I can't even believe I just said that out loud on tape. But
it is true. I've thought that so many times. The way that like this morning for breakfast, I had a strawberry, some cottage cheese, and some yogurt.
It's so funny you should say that, because I have been eating low-fat cottage cheese and some berries or something for lunch. And then I said to my friends, well, if, when I have a box of green SnackWells in my supermarket cart, you have the rights to do an intervention, because like 1992 called and they want their diet back.
Yeah, but at the same time, like circumstance, right? Or context. I don't know why I keep saying, but my body is now able to function burning my own body fat. Whereas when I was an insulin nightmare, I couldn't do it. I couldn't access enough energy from it was water everywhere and not a drop to drink. I couldn't access that very well. And so I had to eat more fat at one point so that I didn't eat SnackWells.
Right.
And now I don't.
Right. And you have an appetite that's suppressed, and you're in control of it. Yeah, it is, context is everything. But I could never have eaten this way and gotten to this point. I mean, I did. I tried for 40 years.
Right.
And it didn't work.
Well, I mean, it kind of goes back to like what Gary Taubes has talked about in many of his books, is that fundamentally the argument is screwy because we're trying to tell metabolically unhealthy, overweight people to eat like thin people, but we're not giving them the bridge to be
person inside.
Exactly.
Yeah. I haven't read his new book yet, but I'm looking forward to doing so.
Yeah. So are you still doing what we might label keto intuitive eating at this point, or low carb intuitive eating?
I go through phases, because I had a medical situation that I was experimenting with some higher carbs, which I'm glad that I did, because it turned out that I can have a little bit of higher carbs and still be ketonic. It didn't help the medical situation, but it turns out that I can be a little higher carb. So because I was doing that, I started tracking again, because I thought I just really, anytime I do any kind of shift like that, I do track for a little bit. And I get a little neurotic with the tracking. And so when I do I start to eat to the tracking versus not being intuitive. And so it's just, I am actually at the point where I included a little bit of the higher carbs. I know how to eat. I know how to sort of the rhythm of my day and things like that. And so I've actually made the decision when I started like tracking in my numbers and,
I still have 27 grams of fat left.
Exactly. So I'm going to eat to the macros versus eat to the hunger.
Yeah.
So I decided that I'm going to pull back a little bit on the tracking for a little bit now that I'm kind of settled into a new rhythm.
Nice.
And that's when I kind of go with the intuition a little more. But I also do that I still do it with safety nets because listen, I don't want to go back. And I do it with safety nets. I work for Dr. Tro. He serves as a safety net. And, and I serve as a bit of a safety net for him. And we talk often about, the ways in which we could, as fellow food addicts, that we could break any system. I could, you give us any diet, we could figure out how to break it. Intermittent fasting, I think I could break it. Intuitive eating, I figured out how to break it. Weight Watchers, veganism, keto, I could break. I could just add sour cream, bacon, and cheese to every meal and voila. I could break it. So I don't fully trust myself, and that's being honest with myself. And I think, it is what it is. And that's the price that I have to pay. Like I say often to myself, do I know better? Yeah. Should I know better? Yeah. But I need help, and thank God it exists.
Yeah.
Thank God people like you exist, and Dr. Tro, and all the people that, really helped me along the way. Thank God you exist.
Oh. Well, I think you're that person for a lot of people. And at this point, I come to you, I'm like, Amy, everything. So, it's, the reality is everyone in this sphere, God in this sphere, I mean, at least everyone I can think of, because they themselves had a problem they couldn't solve.
Right.
And that, I think, is one of the biggest wins of the keto community, that it's not full of yet anyway. It's not full of people who've never had a weight issue, never had a health issue, telling people with weight and health issues how to fix it.
Yeah. I mean, there are occasionally on social media, there'll be people like, oh, I went keto and I never eat and I never overeat and I don't eat any keto sweets and I'm this, like, oh, whatever, what? Like, I'm not interested in you and your story. Like, I'm much more interested in the people that actively have to work at it, because I think there's way more of us that are the silent, well, sometimes silent, sometimes not. But I think that we are the silent majority of people that really are actively working. And it's not always, Amy Berger talks about this a lot, which is one of the reasons that I love her. Like, I love her. That you can get your appetite suppressed and you can not be riding that sugar roller coaster, but it still can be a struggle because there's 400 million other reasons to eat besides actual physical hunger.
Right.
And so I think if I can, I'm happy that I can sort of talk about it and let people know, like, listen, I have been really successful at this, and shockingly so. I am shocked. But I still work at it. And it's still, I show up. I have to show up every single day.
Right. So. When I was in college, one of my first real jobs was teaching people how to take the SAT.
Oh,
this is going to be a strange story, but and I was awful at it because
what did you get on your SAT? Oh, I shouldn't ask that.
I got a 1550.
Ooh,
so which at the time it was out of 1600. It's not as impressive when you think it might be out of 24.
You got a 1550?
Yeah.
Wow, you're smart, Kim Howard. I got a 13 something, and I thought I was smart.
But my point is, I got a 1550 just because I'm really, really good at standardized tests.
Got it.
So when I went to try and teach other, like, that was their criteria. You could get this job if you got a good score on your SATs. But I so I had this job and I would show up and it occurred to me like week 2, I have no idea how to teach people how to take the SAT because all I knew how to say was, you look at the answer, one of them will be correct. And you're going to fill in the circle that correlates with the correct answer. No.
You did not.
I didn't, but it occurred to me like that's if without putting any thought into it, that's the only way I would know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, I am better at teaching things that I am bad at because I had to learn how to get good at them.
Right. You had to figure it out.
I had to figure it out. And so I think that's part of why we're all people who had to figure this out for ourselves. And there's a lot of wisdom in that journey, including in the places it didn't work.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've talked about this a little bit before, and you and I have talked about, just that sort of that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
That feeling of like, oh God, I don't want to be the fat health coach. That feeling of, but the fat health coach at that point, I've lost 200 pounds. So there's value there. I know there's value there, but there's still that, you carry around those battle scars.
And there's a tender underbelly, whether it's chubby or not, right? Like it's the other day, somebody on I had a YouTube video up, which was an interview with me and Dr. Ken Berry about my journey with depression and how keto was important on that journey. And somebody commented on that video, mind you, because I was a few pounds heavier when I filmed that video. Why are you still so fat?
Oh, can I curse, please?
You can.
Please.
You can. Feel free.
Oh, they can go fuck themselves.
Right. And I'm like,
really?
I was like,
that's their takeaway, right?
Right. Your takeaway from my discussion about how keto helped my depression was that thin is the only thing of value.
Yeah, well, of course, if you were thinner, you wouldn't be depressed all these years.
Right? Because my life would be joyous and happy, like every thin person's life is.
Yes. I don't know a thin, unhappy person.
Right. By the way, if anyone's listening, we have our sarcasm faces on. But what I have to constantly remind myself of, and I'm sure you do too, is if I let those people, those trolls, or those misguided souls who hate themselves so much that they cannot fathom a person who's not skinny being of value in the world, if I let them win, all of the people I can help will lose.
Right. And, back to what we were talking about before, your body is not an apology.
Yeah.
And having agency over your own body and your own journey and your own process is really, it's pay, and you can pay it forward by having.
Yeah. But it is a bit of a mind F. I won't say the whole word for some of my people, but yours was appropriate, is to try to be body positive while working in a field that is in any way related to weight loss, because so many people, their only relationship with the desire for weight loss is that feeling of being disgusting. Right. And so it constantly challenges me. And, I try and be grateful for that. Some days I don't have the energy for it, but most days I am actually grateful to get to work in a field that stretches my ability to accept and love myself every day.
It is a stretch. There's a lot of times that it is a mental stretch. There's a lot of times that I'm working with clients that are, they may be less than I weigh, now. I'm never going to be, below a certain weight. I mean, there's some skin stuff that I may or may not deal with at some point. And, I'm working with people that are starting maybe where I am. And I just have to remember where I came from. I formed a miracle.
You've lost a miracle.
Person. I've lost a person and a half.
Right.
And,
you lost a large man.
Yeah. And, I just have to keep it in perspective. And I do, I am so grateful. Sometimes I wake up in the middle and I have to go use the bathroom or something. And I'm like, wow, it doesn't hurt when I get out of bed. Just walking around Manhattan, things don't hurt. And I don't take those little things for granted at all, because I remember I walked around in a body that was so painful on so many levels, for so long that I am grateful. So I try to keep that perspective. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate everything about you. So I really
thank you, Kim. I really meant what I said earlier, that I owe so much of my success to the incredible wisdom and snark and education and all of the above that you have given me over the course of these 4 years. So thank you.
Right. Well, thank you for talking with me today. I think, we meandered, as we will, but I think, I hope people, the point of this podcast, why I do this podcast, is just to try and let people know they're not alone on this journey. And so I really think that this discussion will resonate, at least with our sisters and brothers who are in this same boat. Yeah.
I hope so. I am really not a public person. I'm not a public speaker. I'm not somebody that generally, I very much internalize the messages that I got over the course of my life that, just keep quiet, don't be noticed, keep it in, And so I've come out of my shell a bit, and really the reason that I really do it the most is because so many people were so helpful to me along this process and offered me hope. And I cannot even believe that I am sitting here talking about weight loss, that I am sitting here in the body that I'm sitting in. A friend of mine that I've known since college said to me a couple of weeks ago, if I met you today, your weight would be not even be one of the top 10 things I would use to describe your physical appearance. And it moved me to tears. It was it's the lens through which I've seen everything my entire life. And so if I can offer anything to anybody, it's just, that hope that it is possible, even after almost 50 years.
Yeah.
So,
well, I really appreciate you doing this with me. And so thank you so much for taking time out of your day. And where can people find out more about you?
Well, you can go to, I'm on Twitter, AMYDEE1001. And, you can go to drtro.com to work with me as a health coach if you want, DOCTRO.com. And Facebook.
Okay. I'll put those links with the show notes so that we can find you. Anybody that wants to call.
Just put my cell phone on there.
It's fine.
Whatever.
That reminds me of a story I have to tell you about when a client called at 3 a.m. and I'd forgotten to turn my cell phone off.
Fun times.
Okay. So anyway, I appreciate you. I love you, and I will talk to you soon.
Love you too. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Keto Life Support. Want more information? Want show notes? Want to suggest a topic? Just head over to ketolifesupport.com. That's where all that kind of thing can go on. By the way, I have a request. If you could go to your podcast host and hit subscribe, we would really, really appreciate it. And what would be even more awesome is if you could write a review. And what would be even more awesome than that is if you could write a really flattering review. Just asking, you do you. All right. So thanks so much for